Have you ever really wondered how billionaires build their wealth? A huge part of their strategy is tied up in assets you can't just find on the stock market. Today, we're going to talk about one of their absolute favorites, farmland. And we're going to see how a massive tech revolution is making it possible for pretty much anyone to invest just like them. You know, there's such a simple, timeless truth to this saying. I mean, think about it. Unlike stocks or crypto, land is finite. They really are not making any more of it. That scarcity is the entire foundation of its value, and it's exactly why it's been a cornerstone of wealth for, well, centuries. But what makes it so interesting right now? It's a really good question, isn't it? When you hear that somebody like Bill Gates is one of the biggest private owners of farmland in the entire US, you've got to wonder, what does he know that most of us don't? For the ultra-wealthy, it's not just about tech stocks. It's about owning a real, tangible, productive piece of the world.
So let's pull back the curtain. We're going to break down exactly why farmland is such a powerful investment, and then we'll get into how this tech revolution is finally unlocking it for everybody else.
Okay, so this gets at a really key financial idea, low correlation. Just think of it like this. When the stock market zigs, farmland often zags. So if your stocks take a nosedive, land tends to hold its value or even go up. It basically acts as a stabilizer for your portfolio, and it's a fantastic hedge against inflation. Now this all sounds amazing, right? So the obvious question is, if farmland is such a smart move, why don't more of us own it? Well, historically, it's been locked away behind some pretty high walls. And here's a picture of exactly why it's so in demand. Just look at this. Over the last 20 years, the value of farmland has consistently crushed inflation. So you're not just preserving your wealth, you're actually growing it with an asset that's literally tied to feeding the planet. But, like we said, getting your foot in the door has always been the hard part. Yeah, there have always been these three massive hurdles. First, the price tag is just enormous. We're talking millions of dollars just to get started. Then, you've got the legal maze of paperwork and procedures. And finally, it's what they call illiquid. You can't just sell off a little corner of a farm on a Tuesday afternoon if you need some cash. But here's where things get really exciting. There's a new technology that is smashing all three of those hurdles, all at once. And that technology is called tokenization. So, what in the world is tokenization? Well, to put it simply, it's the process of taking the ownership rights of a real physical asset, like a farm, and turning them into digital tokens that live on a blockchain. So each tiny token represents a tiny fraction of ownership in that farm. And the process itself is surprisingly straightforward. A company goes out and finds a great farm. They buy it. Then they put that farm into its own legal structure, like an LLC. And finally, they issue digital tokens, which are basically shares in that business, and they offer them to investors like you and me. I absolutely love this analogy because it's just perfect. The asset underneath it all is still the same solid, tangible real estate it has always been. You get income when farmers rent the land, and you get profit when the land's value goes up over time. Tokenization just puts that whole classic investment into a modern, easy-to-use digital package. The best part is this isn't some far-off, futuristic concept. Nope, it is happening right now. There are several platforms out there already pioneering this space, turning the theory we just talked about into a very practical reality for investors. And this number, this is the real game changer. Remember that first hurdle, needing millions of dollars? Well, with tokenization, the barrier to entry can be as low as $100. That is a massive, seismic shift in who can access these kinds of wealth-generating assets. And there are even different flavors of this model developing. On one side, you've got platforms like FarmTogether in the US. It's kind of like a traditional investment experience. You pick a specific farm, say a California almond orchard, and you collect passive income. But then on the other side, a company like Agrotoken in Latin America has a more crypto-native feel. They let farmers, themselves, turn their land and even their crops into liquid assets that they can actually spend with a card. Of course, with any kind of financial innovation, it's so important to go in with your eyes wide open. The rewards can be incredible, but every smart investor has to understand the potential risks too. So let's take a look at what you really need to know.
First, remember, the underlying asset is still a farm. So yeah, it's subject to real-world stuff, like bad weather, which can definitely impact profits. Also, the whole regulatory landscape for digital assets, well, it's still a work in progress, and that adds a layer of uncertainty. And while it's way easier to sell a token than a whole farm, the marketplace for reselling these specific tokens is still really new.
But, and this is a really important point, this isn't the Wild West. The most serious platforms, especially here in the US, are structuring their deals to comply with existing financial regulations from groups like the SEC. and that provides a pretty significant layer of security for investors.
So, here's the final question. Does this belong in your portfolio? Tokenization combines that old-world stability of land with brand-new, modern flexibility. It's offering a real chance for anyone to invest a little bit more like a billionaire. Whether this digital key can unlock a piece of your financial future, well, that's a question only you can answer.